Across a forgotten stretch of northern Canada, beavers transform scorched, empty land into the world's largest dam. An engineering feat 850 meters long, so immense it is visible from space. But just decades earlier, this keystone species teetered on the brink of extinction, their near disappearance leaving vast landscapes barren. What happened to unleash such overwhelming power from creatures nearly erased? The answer begins with a desperate gamble and one of the most bizarre wildlife interventions in history. Before beavers reshaped the Canadian wilderness, their numbers once defined entire continents. North America's rivers and wetlands teemed with beavers. Estimates range from 60 million to 400 million animals before European traders arrived. Their dams slowed rivers, raised water tables, and created sprawling wetlands that supported a mosaic of life, from fish to migratory birds. For centuries, these vast engineered landscapes stretched from the boreal forests of Canada to the valleys of California and the marshes of the Atlantic coast. That abundance vanished with astonishing speed. The European appetite for beaver pelts, soft and waterproof and prized for hats, sparked a fur trade that swept across the continent. By the early 1800s, companies like the Hudson's Bay Company sent trappers deep into the wilderness, stripping entire watersheds of beaver. In the Columbia River Basin, policies even called for deliberate extermination to block American rivals, with thousands of animals killed each year. As the trade intensified, harvests plummeted. By the late 19th century, the once vast beaver population had crashed to as few as 100,000, scattered in remote corners of Canada and the Mountain West. The ecological cost was staggering. Without beavers, streams ran unchecked, carving deeper channels and draining wetlands that had stored water for centuries. Over 195,000 square kilometers of U.S. wetlands disappeared, an area larger than England, as beaver dams collapsed and meadows dried out. Landscapes that had pulsed with life grew silent. In the absence of beaver ponds, salmon runs faded, waterfowl lost nesting grounds, and plants adapted to wet soils vanished. The beaver disappearance left a void that echoed across ecosystems. Survival became a matter of luck and geography. A few beavers clung to isolated habitats in places like Idaho and northern Canada, shielded by distance from hungry trappers. But for most of North America, the beaver became a memory, visible only in abandoned dams and ghostly drained wetlands. The loss was not just of a species, but of an entire way that water, land, and life had once been woven together. The land waited, parched and empty, for a solution that no one yet imagined. In the summer of 1948, a team from Idaho Fish and Game faced a challenge that sounded more like a prank than a conservation project. Beavers labeled as troublemakers for flooding roads and orchards around McCall and Payette Lake needed to be moved far from people. The Chamberlain Basin, deep inside the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness, was so remote that mules could not reach it, and trucks were out of the question. The solution came from leftover World War II supplies: parachutes. The plan was simple: pack beavers in wooden crates, attach surplus parachutes, and drop them from planes into new territory. The first volunteer was a sturdy male beaver named Geronimo. Before risking a full relocation, Geronimo endured a series of test flights. Each time he was loaded into a custom-built box designed to open on impact, cushioned with sagebrush and excelsior. Pilots climbed to a few hundred feet, the crate tumbled out, and the parachute blossomed open. On landing, the box would pop apart, and Geronimo would waddle out, unscathed and ready for another round. He passed every test, showing little more than mild annoyance at the repeated journeys. With the system proven, crews began transporting beaver pairs to the airstrip. Each animal was loaded into its own crate, the parachutes carefully packed and checked. Pilots circled over the Chamberlain Basin, scanning for open meadows and slow streams. At the right moment, The crates were released, drifting gently to earth. On landing, most boxes burst open as designed, releasing startled but unharmed beavers into a landscape that had not seen their kind in living memory. Of the 76 beavers dropped, only one crate failed, and that animal died on impact. The other 75 survived the journey, quickly finding water and beginning to build. The Chamberlain Basin, once described as dry and lifeless, began to change. Within a few seasons, beaver families had constructed dams, slowed streams, and spread water across the valley. The test subject, Geronimo, was released last, rejoining his species in a new wilderness. Over the next decade, the landscape transformed. Ponds spread, willows and alders flourished, and wildlife returned to the newly created wetlands. What started as a quirky experiment dropping beavers from the sky became one of the most successful and unusual wildlife relocations in North American history. The legacy of those parachuted beavers would ripple out for generations, turning dead land green once again. In the years after the parachute drop, the Chamberlain Basin underwent a transformation that would have seemed impossible to those who first called it dead land. At Baugh Creek, a place once marked by dry channels and sparse grass, the work of beavers began to show in the most literal sense, from above. Satellite images taken decades apart reveal a landscape shifting from pale brown to deep green. The lines of new ponds and meandering wetlands trace the handiwork of beaver families, each generation adding to the patchwork of water and life. Vegetation surveys tell the same story from the ground. Where only drought-tolerant shrubs once survived, sedges and willows now crowd the banks. Plant diversity in these beaver-shaped wetlands rose by nearly 1/3. Grasses, wildflowers, and young trees flourished in the moist soil, drawing insects and birds that had long abandoned the valley. The return of water brought back frogs, ducks, and trout, each species finding a niche in the mosaic of ponds and marshes. Hydrologists tracked the changes in water flow. Instead of spring floods rushing unchecked down the valley, beaver dams slowed the current, spreading water across the floodplain. The land began to act like a sponge, soaking up rainfall and releasing it slowly through the summer. Even in dry years, the wetlands remained lush, their steady seepage feeding streams that once ran dry by midsummer. From space, the impact stands out as a green ribbon winding through the landscape. NASA Landsat images, spanning decades, show the steady advance of wetland vegetation along Baugh Creek. What began as a handful of parachuted beavers grew into a living system, visible not just to local ranchers, but to satellites orbiting hundreds of kilometers above. The beavers' engineering did not just patch up a stream, it rewrote the valley's future, creating a refuge for life in a region once written off as barren. The next question is how these animals accomplish such feats, turning simple materials into structures that hold water and shape entire ecosystems. Their durable, iterative engineering starts with selecting running water, felling trees, and anchoring sticks and mud to slow flow. Over time, those simple acts spread moisture, build habitat, and transform dust into lasting wetlands. A beaver's transformation of a barren valley begins with a single sound: running water. Drawn to the noise of a trickling stream, beavers respond instinctively, searching for the right place to build. They favor gentle slopes, less than 2% grade, where water moves slowly and the risk of washout is low. In places like the Birch Mountain foothills of northern Alberta, these shallow gradients stretch for hundreds of meters, providing the perfect canvas for their work. Construction starts with felling nearby trees using chisel-shaped orange incisors that never stop growing. Beavers drag branches, sticks, and saplings to the chosen site, anchoring the first layer deep into the mud. Mud, stones, and woven twigs fill the gaps, each addition guided by the sound of water leaking through. If they hear a trickle, they patch it. This process repeats night after night, the dam growing longer as each leak is sealed. Unlike concrete walls, beaver dams are intentionally leaky, and water seeps through, slowing the flow without stopping it. This leaky dam design lets water spread out, raising the local water table and creating a broad, shallow pond. The largest dams, like the 850-meter structure in Wood Buffalo National Park, are built by multiple generations. Each family extends the work of its predecessors, weaving new branches into the old, thickening the structure and expanding its reach. The dam's length scales with the width of the valley and the abundance of available wood. In these northern wetlands, willows and poplars regrow quickly, providing a steady supply of building material within easy reach of the water's edge. Beavers dig canals branching out from the pond, floating heavy logs back to the main construction site, and reducing the need to haul loads over land. Behind the dam, the pond becomes a safe haven. Here, beavers build their lodges, domed structures of branches and mud anchored in deep water. Each lodge features underwater entrances, keeping predators at bay. Inside, a raised chamber stays dry, even when the world outside freezes. The roof is vented for fresh air, and the walls are thick enough to withstand the coldest winters. These lodges often become microhabitats, sheltering not only beaver families but also nesting birds and amphibians drawn to the warmth and safety of the beaver-made pond. By weaving water, wood, and mud into living architecture, beavers create more than shelter. Their structures anchor entire ecosystems, setting the stage for landscapes that can resist drought, fire, and the extremes of a changing climate. In July 2018, flames swept across Idaho's Sawtooth foothills, churning up a wildfire that would scorch more than 65,000 acres. The Sharps fire burned hot and fast, blackening hillsides and swallowing sagebrush as it moved. Yet when the smoke cleared, a peculiar patchwork stood out. Along Baugh Creek, where beaver families had shaped the land for decades, the wetlands remained green and wet, a stark contrast to the charred terrain all around. Fire crews used those pools as safe zones, and wildlife clustered in the cool, damp refuge. Remote cameras documented the difference. Surface temperatures in beaver ponds ran several degrees cooler than the scorched uplands, and the waterlogged meadows resisted the flames that swept through neighboring grasslands. This was not an isolated case. Across the western United States, beaver wetlands have repeatedly served as natural fire breaks. Studies measuring fire severity found that areas with active beaver colonies experienced less intense burns and recovered more quickly. Wetland plants, protected by persistent water, sprouted back within weeks. In places where beaver dams slowed streams and spread water across the valley floor, the landscape simply did not burn the same way. Scientists tracked these patterns with satellite data, confirming that beaver-shaped zones stayed greener and cooler, even as wildfires grew larger and more frequent in a warming climate. To understand the scale of these changes, NASA joined forces with restoration scientists in 2023, deploying Landsat satellites to monitor beaver reintroduction sites in Idaho. Their focus was the descendants of those parachuted beavers and the landscapes they had rebuilt. Using a tool called MRR-MADE, analysts mapped vegetation greening and water retention over time. The data told a clear story. Beaver wetlands held water 30 to 50% longer during droughts, and their soils locked away carbon at rates up to 5 times higher than nearby undammed streams. In drought-stricken years, the difference was visible from orbit, a ribbon of green threading through otherwise faded valleys. NASA's lead analyst described the findings as a turning point. The evidence was no longer anecdotal or local. Satellite imagery, time-stamped and geo-referenced, showed that beaver engineering could be measured in pixels and climate metrics. These results are now guiding policy, with agencies shifting funding toward beaver-based restoration projects. In a world facing more frequent fires and deeper droughts, the case for letting beavers build is now written into the land itself and confirmed from space. Across continents, the beaver's comeback is no longer a quiet story of survival. It is a movement reshaping landscapes and policies alike. In Canada, Wood Buffalo National Park stands as a living example of what is possible when nature is given space and time. Here, the world's longest beaver dam, spanning 850 meters, has become more than an ecological oddity. For conservationists and policymakers, it is a symbol of scale, persistence, and the power of hands-off restoration. The dam's arc, visible from space, draws scientists, land managers, and indigenous partners into conversation about what rewilding can achieve. Elsewhere, the momentum is unmistakable. In the United Kingdom, a new chapter began in 2025 when regulators issued the first license for wild beaver releases in Purbeck Heath, Dorset. For decades, beavers had been absent from English rivers, their return blocked by concerns over flooding and farmland. The Purbeck project, backed by Natural England, required careful planning, enclosed trials, water monitoring, and extensive dialogue with local communities. But the license marked a turning point, a formal embrace of beavers as ecosystem engineers, capable of restoring lost wetlands and reviving biodiversity. Similar efforts are now underway across England and Wales, with Scotland and the Czech Republic expanding their own reintroduction programs. Not all methods mirror the bold experiments of the past. Today, relocation relies on trucks, horse-drawn carts, and family releases, guided by decades of ecological research and increasingly by traditional indigenous knowledge. In Wood Buffalo, Parks Canada works alongside Dene, Cree, and Métis communities, blending scientific monitoring with practices rooted in local history. These partnerships recognize beavers not just as wildlife, but as cultural touchstones, builders whose work is woven into stories and livelihoods. The Wood Buffalo Dam, maintained and expanded by generations of beavers since the 1970s, now serves as a flagship for global rewilding. Its sheer size, more than twice the length of the Hoover Dam, offers a visible benchmark for what natural engineering can accomplish. As satellite images confirm the greening of valleys from Idaho to Alberta, the legacy of beaver restoration is spreading. Policy frameworks are shifting. Governments, agencies, and local groups are investing in beaver-based solutions to water management, climate resilience, and habitat creation. The world is watching as beavers, once nearly lost, reclaim their role as architects of living landscapes. Right now, satellites track wetlands created by beavers spreading across continents, living proof that nature, given space and time, engineers resilience at a scale humans cannot replicate. As climate risks mount, beaver restoration offers a cost-effective, proven tool for repairing land and storing carbon. Sometimes the most radical act is letting nature's oldest builders do the work. What landscapes might we reclaim if we simply let them begin? Share your thoughts below.